I remember the exact moment he walked out the door. My heart felt like it was cracking open, and my breath caught in my throat. We had just finished dinner at home, nothing fancy, just pasta and a glass of wine, when he stood up and told me we needed to talk. His voice sounded distant, like he was delivering a cold, rehearsed speech. He said he'd met someone new, someone who seemed more accomplished. In his words, an upgrade. The tears started before he even finished speaking. I could taste the salt on my lips as I asked why. I'd tried so hard to be everything he wanted. But his eyes never wavered. He said it was about different life goals. I didn't know he meant a bigger bank account or a shinier resume. In that instant, all the future plans we'd mapped out, the wedding venue, the color palette, the honeymoon destination, crumbled into dust. I stood there, stunned and trembling, as he grabbed his jacket and left. When the door clicked shut, it felt final. I sank onto the couch, numb and hollow. But underneath the shock, a spark of anger flickered, promising I was not going to let this define me. Sometimes I replay the early days in my mind, trying to pinpoint the exact moment things went wrong. We met at a charity event, of all places. He looked so charming in his black suit, his eyes warm when he smiled. We chatted about the nonprofit's cause, bonded over our shared sense of empathy, and ended the evening exchanging numbers. Back then, I believed he was the kind of person who understood compassion. We started going on coffee dates, then dinners, then weekend trips. He acted so attentive. He'd surprise me with little gifts, a handwritten note, a small bracelet, my favorite cupcake. I thought it proved how genuine he was. In retrospect, I wonder if it was more about keeping me starry-eyed. A year into our relationship, he proposed. It felt like a dream. He knelt in a park where the lights twinkled overhead. I cried and said yes. Life felt full of promise. We talked excitedly about houses, potential children, vacations in the mountains, and everything in between. Now I question every memory. Did he truly love me? Or was I just another stepping stone until someone better came along? That doubt gnaws at me, but I'm learning to face it. For days after he left, I lived in a daze. Mornings felt like a punch to the gut when I remembered he was gone. I barely ate. I spent hours on my couch, staring at the walls. Friends tried to call, but I let the phone ring. The humiliation pressed down on me like a heavy weight. My fiancé had left me for someone better. One morning, a close friend showed up at my door, unannounced. She hugged me before I could protest, then marched to my kitchen and brewed me a strong cup of tea. She didn't say much, just listened as I broke down, sobbing through the story of how he'd chosen another woman. In the silence that followed, she told me softly, "You deserve so much more than someone who can't see your worth." Those words echoed in my mind after she left. Part of me wanted to believe them, but another part of me felt small and unwanted. Still, her kindness sparked something inside. I realized I had a life to reclaim, a self to rediscover. It was time to accept that he wasn't coming back, and maybe that was a gift in disguise. I decided I needed a change of scenery. My apartment felt suffocating, haunted by memories of his voice and the future we once planned. So I packed a small suitcase, threw in my favorite comfortable clothes, and took a trip to the countryside. I booked a room at a cozy bed and breakfast run by a sweet older couple. Surrounded by rolling hills and blooming wildflowers, I hoped to breathe fresh air into my soul. Each morning I forced myself to wake up before sunrise. I would sit on the porch with a mug of hot chocolate and watch the sky transition from deep purple to soft orange. Something about witnessing this daily miracle reminded me that life kept moving, even when my world felt stalled. Nature had a way of showing me resilience. The sun always rose, no matter how dark the night had been. During long walks on quiet trails, I allowed myself to feel every emotion: pain, regret, betrayal, anger, and moments of odd relief. My feet would crunch on gravel, echoing the slow, steady rhythm of healing. I wasn't over him, but I was learning that my heart could still beat on its own. And that was a start. After 2 weeks in the countryside, I returned to the city. A calmness had settled over me, but life still felt uncertain. I resumed work, burying myself in projects to keep my mind occupied. Even so, I had nightmares about him and his upgrade. In those dreams, they laughed and waltzed through fancy parties while I stood in the corner, invisible. One afternoon, I impulsively searched his name on social media. My heart pounded as I clicked through pictures. There he was, smiling with his new partner, whose life seemed curated and polished. The caption read, "Celebrating New Beginnings." I stared at the photo, the pain throbbing like an old injury. Anger, envy, and sadness whirled inside me. But something else stirred. Determination. I wasn't about to let their polished snapshots define my worth. I clicked out of the app and decided to block his profile. I also made a list of personal goals, simple things at first, like reorganizing my apartment or reading a new book. Gradually, I added bigger dreams, learning a new skill, traveling to a place I'd never seen. I wanted to be more than just the broken-hearted ex. I wanted to find my own kind of upgrade. Work became my haven. I'm in a design firm, and creativity has always been my outlet. My boss noticed my newfound focus and offered me a lead role on a major project, an opportunity I'd been wanting for years. The client was high profile, and the pressure was intense, but something about the challenge energized me. Days turned into late nights at the office. I pored over sketches, color palettes, and brand concepts. Surprisingly, I felt alive. The heartbreak still lingered, but it also fueled me. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself, and, if I'm honest, to him, that I wasn't just a backup plan. I had talent and ambition. During one of those late nights, my coworker found me alone in a conference room, cradling a coffee mug. She said, "I haven't seen you this driven before. Whatever's lighting your fire, keep it up." Her words made me realize I was tapping into a part of myself I'd kept dormant. Before, I'd let my relationship overshadow my own aspirations. Now I could see how far I could push myself, how bright I could burn on my own. The project was the perfect stage to begin my quiet transformation. Despite the progress, doubt still crept into my mind. Late at night, exhaustion and loneliness joined forces to make me question everything. I'd stare at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and wonder, was I enough? Would I ever trust again? Sometimes my chest tightened with the fear that maybe he was right to leave, that I wasn't good enough. Those thoughts hurt more than I cared to admit. But I confronted them head-on, determined not to let them rule me. I started journaling before bed, writing down every nagging worry. Then I'd counter each one with a positive truth, something I'd accomplished, or something I liked about myself. I wrote lines like, "I'm determined, I care deeply, and I learn from mistakes." At first it felt silly, but gradually it helped. In the mornings, I'd read those affirmations. They felt like small sparks of hope. The design project continued to gain momentum, and each milestone achieved became proof that I was capable, strong, and worthy. It felt like building an emotional fortress, brick by brick. If heartbreak had taught me anything, it was that I could survive betrayal and still remain steadfast in my own growing light. I ran into him at a crowded coffee shop a few weeks later. I was waiting in line for a caramel latte when I saw him step in with her at his side. My heart rate spiked. He spotted me immediately, but there was no graceful escape route. We stood awkwardly, just a few feet apart. He said hello, his voice guarded. I glanced at her. She was beautiful, dressed in expensive workout gear, her hair in a sleek ponytail. She gave me a quick once-over and then a polite smile. I felt my knees wobble, but I forced myself to straighten up. "Hi?" I managed, trying to sound composed. He asked how I'd been, in that tone people use when they want to appear caring but aren't. I told him I was doing well, focusing on myself and work. She looped her arm through his and flashed a grin. There was a silence thick enough to cut with a knife. Then my order was called. Before leaving, I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I'm glad we both found what we needed." It was a small victory to say it without my voice shaking. As I walked away, I felt my pulse steady, proud that I'd kept my dignity intact. That night, after the coffee shop encounter, I felt a surge of resolve. I opened my laptop and revisited a dream I'd shelved during our engagement, a plan to start a small online boutique selling handcrafted designs. I'd been toying with the concept for years, but I'd always found excuses not to pursue it. The idea of branching into entrepreneurship seemed daunting, and my ex never truly encouraged it. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. I imagined creating a space where I could showcase my personal style and connect with people who appreciated unique, handmade items. It felt exhilarating just to plan the details, the website layout, the color scheme, the product photos. I stayed up until the early hours of the morning sketching logos and brainstorming names. I felt a spark of joy every time a new idea landed on the page. Maybe it was foolish to jump into something so big, but it also felt liberating. I wanted to invest in myself for once, to show the world and myself that I had something valuable to offer. The next day, I registered the domain name and started mapping out the steps to make my dream a reality. Launching the boutique took every ounce of my spare energy. Between my day job at the design firm and the late-night work on my website, I was running on sheer willpower. But it felt good, like I was finally building something that belonged solely to me. I roped in a photographer friend to help me take promotional shots of a few prototype designs. She gushed over the handcrafted pieces, which gave me a sliver of confidence. Through it all, I discovered I wasn't alone in my journey. A supportive network emerged, a coworker who offered marketing tips, a friend who volunteered to model for photos, even an old classmate who specialized in e-commerce solutions. Each person reminded me that people are willing to stand by me if I let them in. The emotional roller coaster was real. Some days I felt unstoppable, confident I was on the right path. Other days I feared everything would crumble. In those moments, I reminded myself why I started this, to forge my own path, unshackled from someone else's expectations. My ex's departure stung deeply, but it also opened a door for my own ambitions to shine. One evening, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won. To my surprise, it was him, my ex. He said he wanted professional advice for a design project he was involved in at his new job. The request caught me off guard. We hadn't spoken since that coffee shop run-in. I felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to hang up immediately, but another part of me remembered how we once shared ideas freely. Against my better judgment, I listened. He explained the design brief in vague terms, then casually asked if I'd be open to helping out. Maybe just for old time's sake. I paused, remembering how his upgrade had replaced me in every aspect of his life. Was he missing my expertise, or just trying to use me again? My instincts told me to be cautious. So I politely told him I had too many commitments. I kept the conversation short, ended it kindly, and sat for a moment, heart-pounding. Hanging up felt like setting a boundary. For the first time, I realized I didn't owe him anything, not even my professional insight. My hard work on the design project at the firm paid off, and our client loved the final concepts. Word started spreading about our successful campaign. Meanwhile, the online boutique quietly went live. At first, I only shared it with close friends and family. I wanted feedback, but I also feared failure. To my surprise, I received a few orders within the first week. They were small, a custom journal cover here, a handcrafted pouch there, but each sale felt like a personal victory. Someone out there liked my creations enough to pay for them. The thrill was addictive. At the office, people began asking me for updates. Their support boosted my spirits. One day, my boss called me into his office. I worried I'd overstepped by juggling 2 ventures at once. Instead, he congratulated me on the positive attention we were getting and expressed how impressed he was with my dedication. That moment felt surreal. In a single year, I had gone from a broken, almost bride to someone forging a path on multiple fronts. When I got home that night, I smiled at myself in the mirror. I was tired, yes, but also undeniably proud. Step by step, I was rebuilding. Yet progress often comes with growing pains. The boutique started gaining traction, and I found myself buried under orders and client requests for custom work. My apartment turned into a mini warehouse of raw materials, shipping boxes, and bubble wrap. Sleep became a luxury. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, I felt the tightness in my chest return. My body trembled as I realized I was heading toward a meltdown. Memories of heartbreak and abandonment flared up, mixing with the pressure of deadlines. I slid to the floor in my living room, tears streaming, wondering if I'd taken on too much. Moments like these forced me to confront my limits. I had to learn to ask for help, something I'd never been great at. I reached out to a few supportive friends, and they pitched in, packing boxes or organizing inventory. Some even offered emotional support, reminding me to slow down and breathe. It wasn't a miracle fix. I still struggled, but I learned the importance of pacing myself. I clung to the vision of creating something meaningful, both in my career and personal life. That vision became my lifeline, guiding me through the storm of stress and self-doubt. After the breakdown, I made a conscious decision to find balance. I hired a part-time assistant for the boutique, someone enthusiastic about handcrafted items and eager to help. I also started blocking off one night a week for pure relaxation. No work, no social media, just a long bath or an enjoyable movie. The emotional toll of the breakup still lingered, manifesting in unexpected moments of sadness or frustration. But I also recognized a resilience growing within me. My ex had shattered my heart, yet each day I was proving to myself that I could rebuild, stronger than before. I also finally accepted an invitation from a friend to try a yoga class. I had always been skeptical about the hype, but something about focusing on my breath and body movements helped ground me. There was a moment during Savasana, the final resting pose, when tears rolled down my cheeks, but they felt like tears of release, not sorrow. It struck me that the real upgrade in life isn't about a more prestigious partner or a bigger paycheck. It's about learning to heal, to grow, and to nurture a self-worth no one can take away. I was beginning to find that within myself. A curious rumor reached me through a mutual acquaintance. My ex's relationship wasn't as rosy as their social media suggested. I heard whispers about fights, jealousy, and unmet expectations. I tried not to dwell on it. Part of me felt a twinge of schadenfreude, but I also reminded myself that my journey wasn't about them anymore. My focus was me, my healing, my growth, and my future. Still, a nagging sense of mystery hovered. Why did he reach out for design help if he was so happy and successful with his new partner? Was he regretting his choices? The questions lingered but never fully took over my thoughts. I continued pouring energy into the boutique, experimenting with new product lines and gathering customer feedback. Orders started rolling in from places I'd never even visited, and I realized that my vision was reaching far beyond my small circle. At work, I pitched a fresh design concept to senior management and got the green light. Every victory, no matter how small, felt like a step forward. Life was far from perfect. I still had lonely nights, but the difference was I now believed in my capacity to endure and to create my own happiness. It happened on a gray, drizzly afternoon. My phone buzzed, revealing a message from him. This time it wasn't about design advice. It was a cryptic apology that segued into a half-hearted attempt to criticize my recent posts and achievements. He implied that I was trying too hard to prove something. My immediate reaction was a spark of anger. Where did he get off judging my life choices now? My gut twisted, recalling how he'd blindsided me with the news of his upgrade. I reread his message several times, each reading stoking the embers of resentment. But instead of firing back a furious reply, I paused. Did I really want to waste my energy on petty drama? My life had taken a beautiful turn. I was chasing my dreams, growing stronger emotionally, and rediscovering my sense of self. Engaging with his negativity felt like a step backward. After a long moment, I typed a brief response. I'm living my life. You made your choice. I wish you well. Then I blocked his number. My fingers trembled, but a wave of relief washed over me. I had no room for his attempts to belittle or sabotage my journey. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected email from a major lifestyle magazine. They discovered my boutique through social media and wanted to feature some of my handmade items in an upcoming issue about rising small businesses. My heart pounded as I read the message over and over, hardly believing it was real. This was the kind of break entrepreneurs dream about. I spent the following days carefully selecting product samples, writing descriptions, and taking fresh photographs. The magazine's editorial team was gracious, guiding me through the process. The more I dived in, the more I realized I was stepping onto a much bigger stage. Nervous excitement flooded me. I caught myself recalling the past, how I once doubted my own worth and was overshadowed by a partner who didn't truly value me. Now, here I was, preparing to be spotlighted nationally. If I needed a sign that I'd outgrown my old life, this was it. When I finally shipped the samples off, I let myself exhale. Whatever came next, I knew I was proud of what I'd accomplished. I'd taken heartbreak and turned it into a spark, igniting a flame that no one else could extinguish. Word about the magazine feature spread fast. Friends congratulated me. Family members bragged about me to their networks, and even old college acquaintances reached out with supportive messages. It felt surreal, like living in a dream. In the midst of this whirlwind, I heard from that mutual acquaintance again. She mentioned she'd bumped into my ex. Apparently, he looked tired, rattled. Things with his new partner were falling apart. She hinted that he seemed to regret his decision, especially after hearing about my budding success. I thanked her for letting me know, but I tried not to dwell on it. I had no interest in his regrets or how his life was unraveling. If anything, it reminded me how flimsy external upgrades can be when they're built on shallow foundations. My life wasn't perfect, but it felt genuine. Each step I took was rooted in hard work, self-discovery, and a will to rise above adversity. That night, as I packaged new orders, I imagined him scrolling through his phone, seeing photos of my achievements. Perhaps he felt a stab of envy or a twinge of remorse, but that wasn't my concern anymore. I was building something real, something that was all mine. A strange calm settled over me in the following days. I realized I was no longer chasing validation. My successes, while exciting, were more about personal fulfillment than proving a point to anyone else. That shift in perspective brought me an unexpected sense of peace. I even caught myself smiling at simple joys: a sunny day, a heartfelt thank you message from a customer, or a kind word from a coworker. The bitterness that once clung to my heart began to fade. I wouldn't say I'd forgiven my ex or that I'd completely healed, but I was light years away from the woman who'd collapsed on the couch, devastated by his sudden departure. I started to see glimpses of a future where his betrayal was just another chapter in my story. Painful, yes, but also transformative. My mind often went to the phrase, "He's watching me shine from the sidelines now." That wasn't about revenge, it was about growth. He once believed I wasn't enough, that he had to move on to something better. Now, I stood firmly on my own, shining in ways he never imagined I could. For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely content. When the magazine feature finally dropped, my phone lit up with notifications. Friends shared the article all over social media, tagging me in congratulatory posts. My boutique's website traffic skyrocketed overnight, and orders poured in faster than I could handle. I scrambled to keep up, but beneath the chaos, a warm sense of accomplishment radiated. People who read my story in the magazine reached out to say how inspired they felt by my journey. Some were going through breakups, job losses, or personal crises. They said the article gave them hope. It was strange to think that my private heartbreak had morphed into something that could uplift others. Yet, here it was in black and white, shining a spotlight on resilience. That weekend, I held a small launch party to celebrate. It wasn't extravagant, just a few close friends, some light refreshments, and the new items from my collection on display. Laughter filled the room. Hugs were exchanged. I caught my own reflection in a mirror and realized I was smiling so naturally, so freely. If this was life after heartbreak, I thought, I was grateful for it. I had turned a painful ending into a new beginning that brought out the best in me. Around that time, my ex sent another message. Through social media this time, from a new account I hadn't blocked yet. He sounded apologetic, talking about how he missed the good times and felt we had unfinished business. I stared at the message for a long moment, the words floating in a strange limbo of nostalgia and regret. In the past, such a plea might have pulled me in, but now it felt hollow. I recalled the nights of tears and confusion after he left. I remembered how he'd chosen someone else without warning, labeling me as second best. No apology could fully erase the scars he'd left behind. Still, I recognized his humanity in that moment. We had once cared deeply for each other. A part of me wanted to respond with understanding, but another part knew that bridging this gap might reopen old wounds. After careful thought, I typed a short reply. "I appreciate your apology. I've moved on and wish you the best." It wasn't a harsh dismissal or a bitter rant, just the truth. With that, I blocked his new account. The finality felt liberating. I was no longer tethered to him in any emotional capacity. As my boutique continued to flourish, I felt an urge to pay my blessings forward. I started partnering with local artisans, giving them a platform on my website. Together, we showcased handcrafted goods, each piece carrying a story of resilience and creativity. It became a small community, a circle of support where we lifted each other up. The energy in my life shifted again. I found myself excited about the stories behind each craft, how every scratch or stitch represented overcoming some form of struggle. It was more than commerce, it felt like a testament to human grit. And the customers loved it. They connected with the authenticity and heart in each product. I also began mentoring a junior designer at the firm who reminded me of myself when I first started. Nervous and eager, she soaked up every tip I shared. Watching her grow, I realized how far I'd come from being the shattered woman who once questioned her own worth. By investing in others, I was investing in hope. I was reminded that there's a bigger world out there, full of people who face heartbreak or disappointment yet find reasons to push on. Together, we were all stitching broken pieces into a beautiful quilt of second chances. Life has a funny way of opening doors when you least expect it. During an industry networking event, I met someone new, a man who shared my passion for design and creativity. He was warm, patient, and genuinely curious about my experiences. We chatted over coffee, laughing about design mishaps and client quirks. There were no grand gestures or immediate fireworks, but there was an undeniable sense of comfort. We exchanged contacts and stayed in touch. Slow, steady communication turned into friendly outings, then casual dinners. I felt hesitant at first. A small voice in my head warned me not to rush into another relationship after all that heartbreak. But he never pushed, always letting me set the pace. Over time, I found myself opening up about my past, not as a sob story but as a chapter that shaped me. He listened without judgment. He admired my boutique, praising the craftsmanship with genuine awe. For the first time, I experienced what it felt like to be truly seen for who I was. Not for what I could provide, or how I could be replaced. Whether or not it turned into a grand romance, I felt hopeful. My heart was healing, and I was ready to explore new possibilities without fear. Now, looking back, it's staggering to realize how far I've come. Not too long ago, I was picking up the pieces of my life, blindsided by abandonment. I remember feeling worthless, believing I might never be loved or cherished again. Yet, here I stand, leading a successful project at my firm, running a thriving online boutique, and cautiously stepping into the beginnings of something that resembles happiness with another person. I walk around my apartment, which is now full of life. Designs, craft supplies, shipping boxes, and half-drunk cups of coffee on my work table. It's messy, but it's my mess, an emblem of growth and possibility. I think about my ex from time to time, but the memories aren't as painful anymore. They've become lessons, reminders of the importance of self-respect and ambition. Sometimes, late at night, I reflect on the notion of shining from the sidelines. Maybe he's out there, scrolling through my updates, realizing the woman he once dismissed is flourishing in her own right. That might sting for him, but for me, it's simply proof that I never needed to be upgraded. I just needed a chance to show my full potential. Today, I stood on a small stage at a local entrepreneurship conference. The event organizers invited me to speak about my journey, how I turned heartbreak into a successful venture. As I scanned the audience, I caught a glimpse of a familiar face, my ex, lingering near the back. My heart fluttered, but I collected myself. This was my moment to share my story, not relive old wounds. I spoke with honesty and humility, sharing how personal pain became a catalyst for creativity and determination. The audience nodded, some people wiping away tears. When I wrapped up, they applauded, and a wave of gratitude washed over me. I recognized that I wasn't just telling my story for me, I was showing others that it's possible to rise from heartbreak and find purpose. After my talk, he approached me, eyes filled with something that looked like regret. Before he could speak, I extended my hand in a polite, formal gesture. He took it hesitantly. I smiled, feeling neither anger nor sadness, just acceptance that our paths had diverged. I thanked him for listening to my talk and then politely excused myself to greet other attendees. Walking away, I felt light. I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was shining, boldly, brilliantly, and completely on my own terms.